47 soldiers boarded a C-119 cargo plane on November 12, 1953. None of them ever came home. For 70 years, the military called it a routine transport mission gone wrong, but the truth was buried deeper than any grave. This story changes everything you thought you knew about the Korean War. Hit subscribe to uncover more classified files they don't want you to hear. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Moscow time, November 15, 2023. Dr. Elena Volkov jolted awake in her cramped Moscow apartment. The satellite phone buzzed against her nightstand like an angry wasp. 15 years of excavating Soviet crash sites had taught her that middle-of-the-night calls meant only one thing. Someone had found something they weren't supposed to. The voice on the other end spoke broken Russian mixed with English. Heavy accent, probably a local hunter or fur trapper. Dr. Volkov? We found plane, American plane. Very old, bodies still inside. Volkov sat up in bed, fully awake now. Her specialty was Cold War aircraft recovery. Missing planes, crashed bombers, the kind of work that governments preferred to keep quiet. Where exactly did you find this aircraft? Siberian forest, 200 kilometers north of Vladivostok. Ice keep everything, how you say. Perfect. The caller gave coordinates that made Volkov's blood run cold. That sector had been restricted military airspace for decades. No commercial flights, no civilian aircraft. Whatever crashed there had been flying somewhere it shouldn't have been. I need you to secure the site. Touch nothing. Move nothing. Do you understand? The line went dead. But this discovery would uncover a secret that 3 generations of military officials had sworn to take to their graves. 3 days later, Volkov stood in a frozen forest that felt like the edge of the world. Her breath crystallized in the -40 air. The wreckage lay scattered across a quarter-mile radius, preserved in ice like insects in amber. The tail section had survived the impact almost intact. Clear markings in faded paint, USAF 512620. Serial numbers that would take her straight to classified archives if she dared to look. But it was the passenger compartment that made her hands shake. 47 bodies sat in their jump seats exactly as they had died. No decomposition, no scavenger damage. The Siberian cold had turned them into perfect monuments to whatever had happened 70 years ago. Personal effects scattered the cabin floor. Wedding rings, family photographs, letters addressed to wives and mothers back home. But no unit patches, no name tags, no identification of any kind. These weren't regular soldiers. Volkov's team worked in shifts around the clock. Each body had to be photographed, each personal effect catalogued. The aircraft itself told a story of violent, sudden descent. Engine damage suggested the pilots had deliberately shut down power at altitude. But it was the cargo bay that changed everything. 12 metal containers, each one the size of a coffin, lay scattered among the wreckage. Most had cracked open on impact. Inside, Volkov found medical equipment unlike anything she'd seen in Cold War archives. IV bags with unknown chemicals, injection devices with multiple needles, and restraints. Lots of restraints. The manifest, somehow preserved in a waterproof case, listed the containers as Medical Research Materials, Project Mindbridge, Classification Level, Cosmic. But the real horror wasn't what the plane was carrying. It was what they had done to the men inside. Dr. Yuki Tanaka arrived from Tokyo University 3 days into the excavation. As a forensic pathologist specializing in chemical warfare, she'd seen every kind of human experimentation the 20th century had produced. But the bodies from Flight 2620 showed something entirely new. Look at the injection sites, Tanaka said, pointing to tiny puncture wounds on each victim's neck. Multiple injections. Recent ones given the preserved tissue condition. They were injected during the flight? Not just injected, look at their faces. Volkov studied the preserved features. Each man had died with a different expression. Some smiled, others wept. A few showed expressions of absolute terror. But their eyes all looked the same, distant, unfocused, as if they were seeing something that wasn't there. Neural damage, Tanaka continued. Whatever they injected, it affected the men's perception of reality, possibly their memory centers. That night, Volkov couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those faces, the mixture of peace and horror. What had these men experienced in their final moments? The answer came from an unexpected source. Among the pilot's personal effects was a leather-bound flight log. Standard military issue, but this one had been modified. Extra pages sewn into the binding. Personal notes written in pencil between official entries. Captain James Morrison, age 34, from Dallas, Texas. Married to Sarah, father to 2 young daughters. The log showed 3 years of routine cargo flights between Korea and Japan. Medical supplies, ammunition, nothing unusual. Until November 10th, 1953. But Morrison's final entries revealed why 47 men chose to die rather than complete their mission. Morrison's handwriting changed on the final day. Neat block letters became frantic scrawl. The official flight plan showed a routine transport from Osan Air Base to a medical facility in Japan. But Morrison's personal notes told a different story. "They're not soldiers," he had written. "They're test subjects, volunteers who thought they were signing up for psychological evaluation. Instead, they're getting injected with something extracted from captured Chinese prisoners." The next entry was worse. "The serum works. I can hear them talking to people who aren't there. Lieutenant Chen is having a conversation with his dead father. Private Williams keeps apologizing to someone named Kim, probably a North Korean soldier whose memories he's accessing." Volkov read the log aloud to her team. With each entry, the scope of the experiment became clearer. Operation Mindbridge wasn't about creating better soldiers. It was about creating soldiers who could think like the enemy. By injecting them with neural fluid extracted from captured prisoners, they gained access to foreign memories. Enemy tactics, language skills, intimate knowledge of Chinese and North Korean military strategies. But the side effects were horrifying. "Hour 4 of flight," Morrison had written. "The subjects are losing themselves in foreign memories. Thompson thinks he's a rice farmer in Hunan province. Jackson is crying for a mother he never had. They're not accessing memories. The memories are consuming them." Morrison's co-pilot, Lieutenant Daniel Walsh, had discovered the truth about their cargo by accident. Hidden beneath routine fuel calculations was a single page marked Classified, Eyes Only. The document, preserved in Morrison's log, outlined the full scope of Mindbridge. 60 test subjects had already undergone the procedure. Only 13 had retained their original personalities. The rest had become walking vessels for foreign memories, unable to distinguish between their own experiences and those of enemy prisoners. The 47 men on Flight 2620 were the final phase of the experiment, but Morrison had discovered something that made him choose death over delivery. The injection schedule showed that the serum's effects were temporary. After 6 hours, the foreign memories would fade. The subjects would return to normal. Less, except for one crucial detail buried in the medical notes. Each injection damaged the brain's memory formation centers. After multiple doses, the subjects would lose the ability to form new memories entirely. They would become perfect soldiers who remembered only their training and their mission. No families, no personal attachments, no conscience. Human weapons programmed for absolute obedience. Morrison's final log entry was written in steady, determined handwriting. "I swore an oath to protect American lives. That includes the lives of these 47 men, even if they volunteered for this. No one deserves to have their soul erased in the name of military advantage. I'm changing course. If we can't save them, we can at least make sure this experiment dies with them." Flight 2620's final radio transmission, recorded by Soviet listening posts, lasted exactly 37 seconds. "This is Cargo Flight 77 Alpha to any station. We are declaring an emergency. Repeat, we are declaring an emergency." Static filled the next 10 seconds. Then Morrison's voice, calmer now. "Tell my wife Sarah that I kept my promise. Tell all their families we kept our promises. The cargo will not reach its destination." "Morrison, what are you doing?" Walsh's voice, barely audible. "What we should have done at takeoff, Danny. We're going home, just not the way they planned." The engines went silent at 8,000 feet. But the final minutes of Flight 2620 held one more secret that wouldn't be discovered for 70 years. Soviet radar operators tracked the aircraft's descent for 12 minutes after engine failure. The plane didn't fall like a stone. It glided. Morrison kept it airborne as long as possible, steering toward the most remote coordinates he could find. In the passenger compartment, something extraordinary was happening. The serum's effects were wearing off. Foreign memories faded like dreams upon waking. The 47 test subjects began to remember who they really were. Private Michael Chen from San Francisco, Corporal David Thompson from Nebraska, Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez from New Mexico. They understood Morrison's choice, and in those final moments they supported it. According to Soviet ground observers, there was no explosion, no fireball. Flight 2620 simply disappeared into the forest canopy like a stone dropping into deep water. The impact killed everyone instantly. The metal containers shattered. The experimental serum froze in Siberian temperatures. Operation Mindbridge died with its test subjects. For 70 years, military records classified them as casualties of mechanical failure. Their families received standard death benefits and folded American flags. Heroes lost in service to their country. The truth was both simpler and more complex. But Dr. Volkov's investigation was about to be shut down by forces that had kept this secret for 7 decades. On the 8th day of excavation, 3 black SUVs appeared at the forest perimeter. Men in expensive coats and government credentials. They spoke fluent Russian but carried themselves like Americans. Dr. Volkov, this site is now under international jurisdiction. Your work here is complete. The lead agent, who identified himself only as Colonel Brooks, handed her an official-looking document. Joint US-Russian recovery operation. All materials to be transferred to secure facilities. All personnel to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. You've done excellent work, Brooks said, but some discoveries are too dangerous for public consumption. Volkov had expected this. 70 years of secrecy don't end with a single excavation, but she'd prepared for the possibility. Before the government teams arrived, she'd photographed everything. Morrison's flight log, the medical equipment, the injection sites on the victims. Most importantly, she'd documented the personal effects that proved these men had families who deserved to know the truth. That night, in her Moscow apartment, Volkov made copies of everything, not for publication, not for sensational headlines, but for the families who had spent 70 years wondering what really happened to their fathers, sons, and husbands. The letters she sent were simple: a photograph, a wedding ring, a brief explanation that their loved one had died a hero, making the most important choice of his life. But the story of Flight 2620 would have one final chapter that changed how the world understood sacrifice. Mrs. Sarah Morrison was 93 years old when she received the letter. Living in a Dallas nursing home, she had told her granddaughter countless times about the husband who never came home from Korea. He promised he would never do anything that would make our daughters ashamed of him, she had said. I knew something terrible had happened because James always kept his promises. The photograph showed Morrison's flight log open to his final entry. Sarah's aged fingers traced the words her husband had written moments before his death. He kept his promise, she whispered to her granddaughter. They all kept their promises. The families of the 47 men began connecting through social media, children and grandchildren who had grown up with unanswered questions. They found each other through shared DNA results and old military connections. Together they petitioned for official recognition, not of Operation Mindbridge, that remained classified, but of the choice their family members had made to prevent the experiment from continuing. In 2024, a small ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery. No government officials attended, no media coverage, just families who finally understood why their loved ones had never come home. The memorial plaque reads in memory of the crew and passengers of Flight 2620 who chose conscience over command. The questions that remain today will haunt military ethics for generations. Dr. Volkov returned to the crash site 1 year later. The government cleanup teams had been thorough. No wreckage remained. No evidence of what had been discovered there. But the forest remembered. Local hunters reported strange phenomena, voices carrying on the wind during winter storms, the sound of aircraft engines where no planes fly, electronic equipment failing without explanation. Some claimed the voices spoke in multiple languages: English, Chinese, Korean. Words of forgiveness. Messages of peace from men who had carried enemy memories and learned that all soldiers, regardless of nationality, fight for the same basic things. Home, family, the hope of seeing another sunrise. Whether those reports are true doesn't matter. What matters is the choice Morrison and his men made in their final moments. They proved that human conscience cannot be engineered away, that even in the darkest experiments of war, individuals can choose to remain human. The real question is this: how many other classified programs pushed the boundaries of human experimentation? How many soldiers volunteered for psychological testing that went far beyond what they agreed to? Operation Mindbridge officially never existed. The Pentagon denies any knowledge of neural serum experiments. The families of Flight 2620 have been advised that discussing their discoveries could result in prosecution under the Espionage Act. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even when buried under decades of ice and government secrecy. Today, as military technology advances toward direct neural interfaces and battlefield AI, the ethical questions raised by Morrison's choice become more relevant than ever. At what point does improving soldier effectiveness become destroying soldier humanity? The 47 men who died in that Siberian forest 70 years ago provided one answer. Some prices are too high to pay, even for victory. Their sacrifice reminds us that the most important battles aren't fought against foreign enemies. They're fought within ourselves, when we must choose between following orders and following conscience. If this story moved you, share it. History's greatest heroes often die in silence, their stories buried under classification stamps and official denials. But the families of Flight 2620 want the world to know. Their loved ones chose to be human when their government asked them to become something else. The least we can do is remember their names and ask ourselves what we would have chosen in their place.